What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of VR365. It is Sunday. It is April 19th, the real Easter. No, just kidding. And I do have Bobby Blackwolf in the building joining us today. We also have Reckoner VR, Gary from VR Roundtable. And this is Glory Days, man. This is the episode that I was thinking about a couple of weeks ago. It kind of started out as a pipe dream, like, oh, wouldn't it be fun just to talk about like the earliest games that came to HTC Vive, maybe even a few early Oculus games as well. And kind of remember, because it's the 4-year anniversary for both of those platforms. The 4-year anniversary has expired for both of them, and most years we heard a lot of hubbub, like this is a 1-year anniversary, this is a 2-year anniversary, this is a 3-year anniversary. I don't really remember hearing anything about this. Bobby, why don't I send it to you? Did you hear anything like, when it was the 4-year anniversary for the CV1 and the 4-year anniversary for Vive? Did you hear anything on Twitter or websites or anywhere?
Not really. Maybe like some of the games would have said it, like the games that launched then. They're like been around for 4 years. That I think because now's not a very celebratory time for things, but also both companies have moved on to better products.
Yeah, so. That's true. I didn't think about the celebratory time aspect of it. That is actually a factor. Gary, what about you? Did you notice anything anywhere, or anybody, like even threads on like Reddit or anything? I didn't really notice it.
No, I didn't notice anything, to be honest. And a few weeks ago, around the end of March, I was thinking, because I've got my YouTube channel, which has got no content on it at the moment. I did a few like No Man's Sky videos and things like that, but I don't really use that channel or anything. But the idea did occur to me of doing like a roundup of the early days, or maybe stretching from 2016, seeing what was happening back then, and stretching it all the way up to where we are now with Half-Life Alyx, and how sort of the games have progressed in that time. I just thought that would be an interesting idea for a video, but in my usual way, I didn't progress any further with it. I'm just far too lazy to do that. But yeah, I thought that was the only thing, and it was just a coincidence that I thought about that around the time that it was like the 4-year anniversary of the Vive and the CV1 being released. So yeah, I didn't see anything really mentioned too much. No, off the top of my head, I can't remember a single thing of people mentioning like the 4-year anniversary, honestly.
Yeah, well, and then the other question I kind of would go to would be like, is it way too soon? Because like to be retro about something, like typically you need at least 20 years. Like 20 years is the bare minimum. You think about it, we're in 2020 right now, and like 20 years ago, the original Xbox came out, or like a little more than 20 years, it was like PlayStation 2 came out. And I could imagine if you're playing a launch PlayStation 2 game like Smuggler's Run or something, or a launch Xbox game like, what was that game with the blue character? Does anybody remember the blue guy?
Blinks?
No, it was like this weird tall blue thing. I don't remember it. Blinks came a little bit later. Blinks the Time Cat. Yeah, that was a fantastic one.
Right. Because it had a hard drive, and you could use the hard drive to rewind.
Oh, yeah. That
was the gimmick for Blinks.
Exactly.
That's why it could only be on Xbox, because Xbox is the only one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry,
no, it's true. And but like, would you consider that retro right now if you're playing Smuggler's Run or Blinks? I mean, that's probably kind of retro.
10 years is usually when people start considering things retro, because I remember like 8 years ago or something, there was something like, we're going to do a retro gaming competition and stuff, and it was like Halo and Guitar Hero, and I'm like, wait a minute, retro? But yeah, I mean, sometimes some people would say anything that's a little longer than 10 years.
Yeah. What about you, Gary? What do you think about the idea of when things go retro, or do you just not worry about it?
I don't worry too much about it. I've heard these conversations on other podcasts before where people do discuss what is retro and what isn't. And there's retro gaming podcasts out there that will dispute anything past sort of Super Nintendo couldn't be considered retro at all. Nintendo 64, they don't consider that retro even. There are podcasts like that out there that exist. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't consider VR, for example, like the 2016 releases of the commercial VR headsets. I wouldn't consider that retro necessarily, but it's interesting to look back either way, isn't it?
Retro, the definition of retro to a lot of people is what I played when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So those retro podcasts they were kids in the 80s and 90s. So of course, nothing that came out when they became an adult is going to be retro, but kids who are just now entering like 20 to 21, to them retro is PlayStation 2 because that's what they grew up playing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still think, I mean, I agree with that. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Like, I was a kid in the Atari days. I didn't have in television or a ColecoVision. That was something that I dreamed about. Like, other people had that. And then I had a Nintendo Entertainment System. And yeah, those were like, yeah, that was that's really the retro, the childhood thing. But also, I'll say that, like, once 30 years passes, everything's retro. Like, you could have been 50 years old when it was happening, and now you're 80. It's retro now, man. 30 years have passed. I don't know. I think that's a long time. But let's forget about that, and let's talk about what we're going to talk about today, which is Glory Days. It is all about Glory Days, guys. And I thought what we would do for this podcast is just kind of make it casual. What we're going to do is we're going to celebrate our favorite experiences, our favorite games that came out right around the launch. Mostly about HTC Vive, not because we're anti-Oculus here, but Roomscale was the Vive. The motion controllers was the Vive. So I was not anti-Oculus in any way, but it was like, well, I'm going to wait for them to get their motion controllers. Bobby, I know you had an Oculus immediately. You had a Vive immediately. So were you playing your Oculus for like a week or two, and then did you get your Vive like right away, or were you waiting a bit? Because most people had to wait.
I got the Vive right away. I think it was like maybe day 2 or 3 is when I got the Vive, because I had ordered all about like the order that you the order that you ordered. But I didn't get the Rift enough. I actually remember I was able to, in the early days, you could actually use the DK2 with the new Oculus drivers. So I do actually remember playing DK2 with the new drivers, and they actually looked a lot better even in the DK2. But I didn't have the Rift right in the beginning. But what happened with me is I was able to try a Vive before it came out. One of my friends, they run a VR company down here in Atlanta, and they had a Vive Pre, and they allowed me to come to their office and try it. And I was like, okay, I get Roomscale now. Like, I got it.
Oh,
wow. It made sense now.
So wait, you saw the future of entertainment as we know it, like, ahead of schedule.
By like a month.
Oh.
Like, let's not get crazy here. It was like a month or month and a half, but yes.
Yeah, that must have been incredible. So, I mean, were you like under a special NDA or anything, or did they just had the buddy system? Like, we know you're not going to say anything about this, right?
It was called the Friend DA.
Yeah.
And I actually did see the Oculus, I think the Oculus Touch through a Friend DA as well, before the Touch controllers came out. So I went, and basically what it was is they're like, okay, we're just going to put you in this and you can figure it out. And they handed me the wands, and they put in Tilt Brush. And that's when I like actually understood what Roomscale meant. It was really Tilt Brush is what opened my eyes to all that.
Yeah, absolutely. We forget about that. What about, so you just had that wand there. Go ahead and pick it up again and feel the beautiful plastic. It actually, though, seriously, if you've used a Valve Index, the feel of that plastic is a million times better, in my opinion. The Valve Index plastic feels like the cheapest plastic on planet Earth. I don't know what it is.
Mine's the opposite.
Really?
This one actually, the Vive wand feels a little lighter than the Knuckles.
Yeah. I just remember, like, I tell this story every time. I remember getting the Vive and those big wands, but I remember looking at them and thinking, this is Star Trek, man. I'm in Star Trek already. Like, it just seemed like from the future, you know? And they were heavy, and like, it felt like, yeah, this could be $100 and something. Look at this thing. It's space age. And then how quickly, like, it basically became these big, gigantic doofus sticks that just didn't seem very ergonomic. It happened pretty quickly. What about you?
Yeah, well, when you get to these, then you're like, oh yeah, the Vive wands are huge compared to the small touch controllers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, dude, the touch controllers just changed the whole game. Touch one, I mean, comfort level, wow, incredible.
Yes.
Okay, so what we're going to do to start off Glory Days, we're just going to kind of go roundtable style, basically. And we can start off with Gary. And this is just, is there a particular game or experience, an early experience that you had that you felt was really powerful, or you have great memories about it?
The one that always comes to mind whenever we discuss this kind of thing is Vanishing Realms. That was the first one, and that was like one of those games that was really focused on this room scale thing as well. And whenever I think of that first week of getting my Vive, it's Vanishing Realms that I think about immediately. It's Vanishing Realms, and you had the teleport. A lot of games had the teleport back then. Not almost none had natural locomotion that I can think of. The Vanishing of Ethan Spire. Sorry, Ethan Spire. What am I talking about? That's my. Forget about that. The Vanishing of Ethan. Somebody.
Carter? No, is it Carter?
Ethan Carter.
Something like
yeah,
that.
that's it. Yeah. Forget that. Anybody who recognises that reference, ignore that. But yeah, so there was that, and I think that had natural locomotion. But a lot of the games back then, it was all sort of teleport, and you had to use the room scale. That's what we were told. You teleport to a location, and you have room scale to move around in that location that you've teleported to, and that was, at that time, because it was still sort of so revolutionary, that method of playing a game, that you want to take full advantage of it. And in Vanishing Realms, it really was a fantastic game to take advantage of that. Because I remember one scene in Vanishing Realms in particular where you go under this sort of wooden bridge area, and then you find yourself a little bit later on in that level, you're actually walking over that wooden bridge. And I just remember teleporting on top of that and then using the room scale to walk up and down this bridge. And it was, absolutely fascinating at that time to do that. And that is one memory that will always stick out for me on that first 2 weeks of owning the HTC Vive. So Vanishing Realms, without a doubt, is the one for me that just pops out at me.
Yeah. One thing I think about Vanishing Realms is, well, it was my game of the year for 2016. Like VR Roundtable, I think we might have actually did like a little game of the year thing because we started VR Roundtable like August or something, or I forget when that year. And later that year, I think we did do our first game of the year award thing, and Vanishing Realms was my pick. And it's like, dude, this is what it's all about, right? Your boots are on the ground. You got a shield in one hand. You got a sword in another. You're in this dungeon. The moonlight is shining through. And it's just, the visuals, it's like a Zelda game that's brought to life. Bobby, we're going to talk a little bit about horror and stuff, and horror is a factor in a lot of cases, right? But with this game here, though, this was something that concerned me, because I'll tell you what, guys, in the early days of VR, every single game I went into, I didn't know, is this thing going to cause me a major problem? Am I going to have a panic attack? VR was so brand new. And you don't know what they're going to put in a game. You don't know what a developer is going to do. You don't know what's around that dark hallway. So Bobby, what was your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, the reality is that the easiest emotion to evoke in someone in VR is fear. And it's the simplest one, so it's the one that everybody went to. And I understood that. I got it. So I stayed away from a lot of stuff like that just because I didn't know. And even there's a big major release that came out in the past month that I've kind of stayed away from. Even I've played a little bit, but not as much, just because I medically shouldn't handle it. Like, I shouldn't put myself in that situation. I don't watch horror movies either. So it's more of a medical thing that I'm kind of worried about, with just mental health and stuff like that, which is real, by the way. So how I handled it is I kind of stayed away from a lot of the horror stuff. So the games that I played at launch were like Job Simulator on the Vive. That was the big one that I remember, because there's funny stuff in it. It's not really horror. But I stayed away from a lot of stuff. I also don't like shooters. So like 70% of the video game industry in general is closed off to me. But I'm fine with that.
Yeah, because I'll tell you what, like Vanishing Realms, let me go ahead and switch back over here. Vanishing Realms, I was kind of worried about this with all these different games. And because when you're brand new in VR, like, I understand there's a lot of new players in VR that that are concerned about this stuff, because like you don't know how powerful it is. You don't know how good it's going to be. You don't know how immersed you're going to be. And what I've found, like one of the themes of this entire show, I think, is going to be that I've gotten accustomed to a lot of VR's taking over my nervous system, you know what I mean? And like really like I've gotten accustomed to a lot of that. So it doesn't have the power that it had in the early days. But Gary, what about you? Did you have any concerns? Like when you were playing Vanishing Realms, you're going down a dark hallway. You might not have known what was going to be on the other side of that hallway. Was there any concerns for you when you first started playing VR in terms of what you could handle and what you couldn't handle?
Yeah, I mean, I think with everybody, when you first try it and you don't know necessarily what to expect, I tried VR a couple of times before, but when it came out and you're experiencing it for the first time, you think, you know, I'll take myself a little bit easy with this. I didn't know if I was going to suffer from motion sickness, for example, and all of these other things. But quite rapidly, I discovered that I could handle things pretty well, because I'm not great with heights in real life like you, Anthony. I know that you've mentioned this before, and I'm not great with heights in real life. And I was thinking, you know, am I going to have a problem with something like Windlands? Another game that we can talk about, because Windlands was a fantastic game, but this was always going on at the back of my mind, and it's also a game that a lot of people can suffer motion sickness with. So those were my concerns initially. But just talking of horror games like A Chair in a Room, that was a very early release. It might have been a launch release for the main VR headsets as well, but that was horror, and I took that easy to begin with. But before long, I found myself diving in, because I still to this day, that still stands out to me, and I don't know how well that game stands up overall. But as a VR horror game, the intensity of that is pretty high. I find is actual suspense horror, I suppose, not like monster horror. It's not that kind of game, but it's the suspense horror. And these were all the concerns, really: the heights, the horror. Can I handle? Am I going to get sick with this stuff? These are all things that I was sort of dealing with in the first week or two, definitely.
You know, real quick before we get off the subject of Vanishing Realms, I just wanted to mention my favorite aspect of this game was like when you first got outside, because you were mostly inside this dungeon to start out, and then you eventually get outside and it's dark and the moon is out, and there's like trees and grass. Like you'll get to this like open area, and there was something about that open area that really reminded me of the very first Halo. Because when you first start on the very first Halo, it's like nighttime, it's like moonlight, and there's like it's like forest, and it like has a certain look. And for some reason, that just triggered the memory of Halo to me. And I started thinking, oh my God, one day I'm going to be playing Halo in VR. Now, little did I know it'd be like 3 decades later, because it doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. But like this,
there is that thing. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, there is that thing with that section when you do go outside, because it is a bit like Halo. Halo, that's a big wide open section in that game when you first get outside in Halo, but still relatively enclosed. It's enclosed by all the mountains and things like that are around you. So it gives you the idea of how vast this world could be, but it's not there. Vanishing Realms does the same thing. It's like an open area, but really there's not that many places you can go, but it gives you that sense. And that was something that we were missing a lot of in the early days of VR as well, which games like this tried to deliver in some way.
Yeah, a lot of people complained about this game because of how short it was. Like that was the big knock on this game, is like, yeah, you could buy Vanishing Realms, but it's over in 2 hours. Bobby, what do you think? Because that was a very common complaint in the early days of VR. It's still a complaint today, but maybe a little bit less so. But like people were so hyper concerned, like, oh, that game's only an hour and 45 minutes. How dare they try to charge $25 for it?
I think that's fine. And in fact, because I have less time in the day, I prefer shorter games. And I would prefer to have an experience that's an hour and a half or 2 hours long that is basically just constant, rather than a 30-hour experience where there's 25 hours of filler to make that 5 hours actually seem like there's more there. So to me, time is not the only factor in how much something should cost. Just to me. So, but I also understand that people were like, well, all VR are these short tech demos. You know, there's 1 to 2 hour experiences or quick Katie replayed stuff. But no, where's my meaty triple game, which we didn't get until about 3 to 4 years later, where you can actually have games that are 15, 20 hours. But with me in VR, still, I don't know if I want to spend 8 hours playing a game in VR, where I can still do that in the what I guess you guys would call the old and busted way of playing games.
No, I mean, dude, it's yeah. No, I mean, I'm not anti-flat. I just, for me, it's the amount of hours, like what you're talking about, right? I mean, we all have limited amount of time. We're all busy doing things, and like you have your discretionary hours, and maybe some of it you might want to watch some dumb Netflix show. And so you're dividing your time up amongst all these things. And so for me, it's like if I got time to play a game, I'm going to play flat. That's my only thing about flat. But let's see. So, Bobby, what is one of the early games for the Vive that, like, right around launch? Was there any particular games that you really got into at the very beginning? Oh, you were speaking. Actually, wait, you were talking about, yeah, Job Simulator. Okay, so let me go ahead and grab a Job Simulator trailer so we can talk about that one. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about your initial experiences with Job Simulator?
It had the right amount of humor, and it had it had all the room scale gimmicks and stuff. It was a great. I mean, you gotta realize when I got my VR headset, it wasn't as much for me to play as it was for me to show other people what it was like, because a lot of my friends and a lot of people around me couldn't afford this stuff, and I am fortunate enough and very privileged enough in life to be able to afford all this stuff through my day job. So I actually was things I can put people in and see their reaction, and Job Simulator really did that. We had so much laughter and fun watching people trying to play Job Simulator and all the hilarity that ensued. So that's why this one specifically stuck out with me. And it was a good use of the room scale, and it showed people what it was like and what it's like, because you can talk about, you can sit here and show a trailer on Twitch and play it on Twitch and have a webcam on you, but nobody really can tell what it's like until they play it. And Job Simulator really was a really good introduction to VR, and that's why it really stuck out for me.
Yeah, one of the cool things about it, like in the very early days of VR, and this is like a subject unto itself, is like the whole room scale thing. Like room scale was this big deal in the beginning. People thought, the bigger the room you had was so key, and like how big of a space can you get? Can you move that couch to some other place to get yourself a couple extra feet? Mm-hmm. And people were trying to walk around in their play space because a lot of the games were teleport. And so if you really wanted to have that more immersion, you try to get a bigger play space. Gary, we know Gary's always had, that's his, behind him is kind of what his play space has always been. So he's always been constrained there. Bobby, what about you? Were you able to get, how big of a play space were you able to create during this early period?
So during the early period, my office was, I think it was about 6 feet by 6 feet, a little bit more. And then this room that I'm in now is also my current play space, and it adds about 1 foot on each side. So in my office, everything is on the side, and I have a big open area right here where I play. So it's about 6 feet by 6 feet. The only thing that I worry about is you have a fan above me right in the center. So, and every once in a while I have hit it, but I haven't hit it yet. So myself lucky. And I do have my office TV over on my right here. It's an ELP, and so I am always constantly worrying I'm gonna smash it or something. I haven't yet, so good that sticks around.
Yeah, so you didn't really have a super giant space to work with either, but the nice thing about Job Simulator, it was one of these early games that was like designed where it would adjust according to how, so like the refrigerator, you'd have to walk far to get the refrigerator, but if you're in a smaller space, the refrigerator is just right behind you or whatever. So it was clever how it did that. It's kind of sad though, when we think about modern games now, nobody does this anymore. Gary, what do you think about the fact that like Roomscale was this master idea? Like it was the whole thing. It was like you had this volumetric cube or rectangle that was like, this is the holodeck. You know, you had your own little baby holodeck. But now so many VR games, we stand in the middle of our holodeck, but we don't really go anywhere because we're just using trackpad.
Yeah, I think the original idea around Roomscale was to sort of mitigate the motion sickness that Valve discovered a lot of people had when they were doing these early experiments with VR. So they tried to stop people from getting that by making all movement that you made in VR natural and one-to-one with your real life movement as a way to stop motion sickness. And that's why they came up with this idea of the room scale kind of VR. And that was utilized a lot during these early days because Valve told the developers that were making games for for the Vive headset, they wanted it to be where people were not going to get motion sickness. So you had a lot of the early games, Vanishing Realms, or all of these other ones were room scale games. You weren't going to get motion sick in them, but they were limited by that in other ways as well. So I actually really liked the room scale because I liked it being one-to-one movement when you can teleport to a certain area and then you can wander around your room, and it is natural. It feels natural to be in that space. Like Vanishing Realms is the example I was using earlier. When you can just wander around a little area that you've teleported to, look up to the sky, look out of the window, move over to a door, it just feels far more natural than using a thumbstick or trackpad to do that movement. And to this day, I think it feels far more natural, but it's not really practical in a lot of games when we want these more all-encompassing experiences for the most part.
Yeah, it's interesting because like with the Oculus Quest, we might have this ability where if you could go to some place and have a bigger area, you can get. Bobby, have you seen any of these videos like Space Pirate Arena or anything where these people are running around inside a warehouse and the warehouse is empty, but they're running around? Mm-hmm. There's parking garages.
I've actually done a high-end version.
Oh, okay, yeah, the Void or something.
No, actually, it's a local company here in Atlanta. I'm in Atlanta, called Motion Reality, and they actually do training simulations for police and stuff. And they have a big house, and they have their own custom VR rig with a big backpack and guns and stuff, and basically warehouse, and everybody was in it, and it would be like going through a building and stuff. And so it would be like 4v4. There was one where we were all monsters going through a city because they wanted to change it up. Yeah, so I've done that. I haven't done the Void yet, even though we do have a Void now that's opened here in Atlanta. I just haven't gone down there yet to do it.
It's a bad time for the VR arcade industry right now, man.
It just opened too.
Yeah.
It just opened in December. Yeah, one of the VR arcades around here, they closed and they liquidated everything, and they left about a month ago.
Do you think with the popularity of the Quest, and so much more popular if they had any of them to sell to anybody, but with the popularity of the Quest doing so well, and then with all this little like mod activity that is going on the sides, and these people making these bigger, more expansive things, but you got to go to a school gymnasium, you got to find a place somewhere, but people will find a way. The dinosaurs found a way. So do you think that's going to change people's appetite for VR, where they're like, man, real VR is when you really move around, man?
Maybe.
Yeah, but then
there's a lot of accessibility issues also, because a lot of people, there are a significant amount of people who use VR to do things they can't do. And there's a lot of people that, like I know one person, he actually works for a gaming news website. He's local here. We're friends. He's in a wheelchair. So he can't do all that VR stuff. And so he was even asking me, he's like, hey, do you think I'd be able to play this VR game sitting down? I'm like, yes, you can. And then he wound up loving it. And also, like, for me, the reason I don't play that many shooters in VR is because my aim is terrible in real life. And so my aim in VR is terrible. whereas I can use my abstraction device and I can aim a little bit better. So it really depends on the people. There's some people who want the hyperrealism and they want to be able to duck and roll and move around and all that stuff. And then there's people like me who are like, I play games to relax. And so I've already had like a full day of physical exertion. And so maybe VR allows me to go somewhere and do something without actually having to do the physical exertion of doing the thing.
I just on that point actually, quickly, Anthony. There was I remember going into VR chat about 2 weeks before I got my Vive, or about a month before I got my Vive, and I was just playing it, on desktop that you can do. I believe you can still do that. You can just play VR chat on desktop and go in and talk to people. And they were having one of these evenings in there. I can't remember who did it now. But anyway, it was like a hosted evening where you can go in and just talk about virtual reality. And there was this one guy there that actually was talking about the Vive and Roomscale, because at that time, Roomscale had sort of dominated the discussion around VR, the consumer release of VR. And everybody was saying, Roomscale is what needs to happen. And Oculus needs to release a headset that is also capable of Roomscale. And then there was this one guy there who, like Bobby was just really referring to, he was saying, well, I've not got the capability to have room scale. I've got a tiny little room. I've got disabilities, and I use VR to escape. I use it where I can be sitting in my tiny little room and then feel like I'm in this entirely different place, with this wide open space, and use it in that capacity. So VR for him wasn't any use. And it's an interesting point to make on that, because as much as I agree with that, and I think that's a great way of looking at VR, when at that time, not so much now, but at that time, it was still so focused around it being room scale, and room scale being the way that people would most enjoy VR, that I sort of subscribed to that opinion. I still wanted room scale at that time, and that's changed drastically now. Of course it has.
Yeah, for me, it hasn't changed at all, because like I'm playing Half-Life Alyx, and like just seeing my guardian boundary, like, I'm reaching out with one of my arms, and then bam, the guardian boundary pops up. And then it's like, oh yeah, you're in a video game. You're not really in this like incredible environment with this incredible movie that's unfolding all around you. You're in a video game. And so like, if I could have the biggest open area possible and turn off my boundaries and have like a giant carpet, and when I step off the carpet, I know, okay, I gotta get back. But like, I don't want to see, like, I want to be bending down, opening drawers, walking around the table, and I don't want to see the Guardian pop in. So I'm looking forward to these Quest games where they're almost going to be designed for you to find like a playground somewhere on an overcast day where you could just have a ginormous area and just be walking around. You're going to have somebody with you. They're going to have to spot you just so you don't walk into a pole or somebody tries to jack you or whatever. But definitely, but yeah, I mean, VR has all kinds of ways to play. But let's get back on the subject, folks. It is Glory Days. We're talking about the best games of early 2016. Now, Bobby Blackwolf mentioned Job Simulator. Gary mentioned Vanishing Realms. Let's see. So the first game I'll grab from my little pot is, let's see. I'm going to grab Hollow Ball. Yeah, because probably no one else is going to talk about Hollow Ball. So I'll go ahead and talk about Hollow Ball. This was a very early, I believe this was a launch game. The developer is Tree Fortress Games. I have not heard anything from these people. I know they brought it on to like PlayStation VR. So Hollow Ball is on PlayStation VR. I don't know if it ended up on any other platforms, and I'm not sure why we haven't seen anything from these guys. But in the early days, this was super cool because it was very Tron-like. It was super simplistic. It ran very well. That was another thing. I mean, remember, back in 2016, I didn't necessarily have the most powerful computer in the world. I had a GTX 970. I had an i5 2500K that was like from 10 years earlier that I was still using. So like games that ran better, that was a bonus as well. But this game, you're basically playing racquetball in this game, and you're moving from side to side. And because I did have this big play space here, And at that time, I was trying to squeeze out every last inch of the play space. Like every inch mattered, man. So I was like taking my Guardian like all the way to the very breaking point of possibly running into these walls. And so I got it to the point in this game where I'm like dashing over here, dashing over there. Of course, occasionally you'd step on the cord and it would ruin the whole thing. But like this gave me this idea. I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to revolutionize exercise as we know it, because you're going to be able to play tennis in your own little room, because I'm practically playing tennis. The dream still hasn't fully happened. It could happen with a Quest if the Quest was like super comfortable and was like 200 grams instead of like 500 grams. But we're eventually going to have a super comfortable lightweight headset that is wireless, and you could run around and like you could do some crazy stuff in your own room, and you could get some exercise. But Gary, why don't I switch over to you? Hollow Ball. Did you ever play this? Do you know anything about it? Okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this was one of the big titles. A lot of people were talking about this in the early days, but it sort of quickly left the conversation, I think. But it was a good game. I really enjoyed it back then, and they expanded it a little bit. They added a few extra modes and stuff like that in there. I did go into Hollow Ball last week and played a little bit more of it as well. And yeah, I still think it's a good game. There are times when I feel like I've hit the ball and it just seems to go through the bat, but maybe that's more on me than the game itself. I don't know, but it's I still think it's a good game worth playing. And like I say, if you've got a bigger, this is one that really does benefit from having a bigger play space, because the area I've got, I'm not really moving a great deal around. So I think it would benefit from that. But yeah, well, I thought it was a good title, and it got a lot of love that first sort of few weeks of consumer VR.
Yeah, Bobby, do you remember Hollow Ball at all? And if you never played this, you could just kind of give us your thoughts on like almost every VR game having some relation to Tron. What about that?
Yeah, no, I didn't play this one because since I was around a lot of the games and played a lot of the games from before the consumer launch, because I had started with the DK1, the game that's like this that I played a whole lot was Proton Pulse, which was essentially, it was Pong, but like it wasn't back at you. It was like Breakout. So it was, you were playing in this Tron world with Tron music. Jake Kaufman, who did the Shovel Knight soundtrack, contributed a song to Proton Pulse. So very EDM, very Tron heavy. This same kind of thing. You had the ball coming. When it first came out, you used a controller. So you use like an Xbox controller for it. But then he did actually release one that used the Vive wands and stuff, and so, but it was a 3D breakout like this. So that's what I played instead of Hollow Ball, was Proton Pulse.
Yeah. There's there's so many games that like early days I started trying to say Tron-like. It's a Tron-like, and I was trying to get that phrase popular. I still have hope for it eventually. But Gary, why don't we go ahead and go back over to you? So your first game you wanted to talk about, Vanishing Realms. Do you have another one for us?
Yeah, this one. So I wanted to mention only because it was, again, a big thing. And like Bobby, I think this points to what Bobby was saying earlier about how when you've got VR, you want to show it to people. And The Blue was a huge demo material title that was released on launch, and absolutely fantastic. It was the first thing that I put my parents in, my kids. That was the first thing I put my kids in, just demoing VR to them. And it's, by today's standards, it's very limited what you can do, but it's still impressive today. Headsets, the Index and the high resolution headsets, it still looks absolutely fantastic. So it was an important title, I think, during those early days, because when shops, retail stores and things like that, they demoed VR, this was one of the games that they would use, because it's a passive experience. You didn't need to do that, yet you could understand VR was without having the need to learn any controls or anything like that necessarily. So I think Blue was a very important title. It was impressive, and I could still go in there now and just still enjoy myself, honestly.
Yeah, Bobby, did you mess around with the Blue or use it as demo material?
Oh yeah, that was also the first demo I would put people in, and actually the Blue's been updated a couple times. Go in now, and they've added, like, under the Deep Sea one, they've actually added some stuff to it.
Oh,
So they've
okay.
even updated. They've added a new ending to the deep sea one that you're underwater. But no, I put everybody in the whale experience, and it was great because like I would be able to give them one wand because I would actually have them turn it on so they could actually have the idea of okay, I used the wand and stuff, but they didn't actually have to do anything more with it. But I would put them in the experience and just waiting for their reaction to the whale showing up and
Yeah.
looking at them. That was always a thrill. So no, I've got several hours in my Steam library of the blue just putting other people in it because I would go to meetups and stuff because I actually traveled with this and actually I was going to show this because you were talking about like people didn't have the machine for it. This is the only time I've ever bought a pre-built machine. Usually I'd build my own machines, but I'm going to move my camera. Apologize for the mess here, but you should be able to see this is the Oculus Ready. This was the Oculus Ready Asus, and so I actually bought that because the power supply on the outside. So it's a very small machine, and so I can travel with it. And it has a GTX 980 in it, and I still use it today as my main machine that I bought. But it does have the little Oculus logo on the bottom of it.
Sweet, sweet. Yeah, I do remember the blue, and I would use this as my number one go-to demo material. Like whenever there was like a barbecue or something, and tons of people would be here for like somebody's birthday party or whatever, 4th of July or whatever it was. Like I would be like, hey, I got this VR thing. You want to check it out? And especially like soccer moms and grandmas and stuff, that I would either put them in Tilt Brush or the blue. And like they would always have like, oh my god, I can't believe it, like they would just be totally amazed. And it's still weird to me to this day that like to me that it's such an amazing demo, but then we have other people that they're just not impressed with VR. Gary, speak to this. Like, what is it? Why are there like two distinct camps of people in this world? People that can try the blue and they immediately are like dazzled, and people that are like, yeah, it's all right.
I think a lot of it just comes to something I've mentioned before. It's got to be being able to see the potential, because you can go into the blue and just think, okay, this is cool, okay, but it's not necessarily leading anywhere. It's not necessarily revolutionizing anything that I'm going to be doing. This is what the experience is, and that's it. It's in 3D. It looks cool, and you could have that impression. But to me, the fact is, once you understand what VR is, it's the potential that then that's where your mind goes of what this could potentially lead to. That is the interesting thing, and why I became a VR enthusiast. People that are still to this day not interested in VR, and I think it could be you could be a gamer, because VR is still focused primarily on gaming at the moment, and you could potentially be a gamer who just likes sitting down in an evening and playing a game on TV, and that's fine. You use it, as Bobby was saying, you use it as a relaxation tool. You sit down and you play a game of an evening, and that's how you see gaming to be. And anything beyond that, you don't really want to get involved in, and you don't see VR as going anywhere beyond gaming or anything like that. And so if it doesn't hook you in the gaming capacity at the moment, and you don't see it going anywhere else beyond that, then really what does it offer you as a person? But I think there's always going to be people that are just not interested in it. There's people that are not interested in a lot of different technologies, and VR is just going to be another one, I suppose.
They're just late to the party. They'll get here eventually. Bobby, but let's stay on target. Glory days, glory days. Bobby, any other early things that you can think of that you want to talk about? I might have the trailer, I don't know, but
you probably don't, because I was unfortunately unable to get you any kind of lists and really think about it. But I wanted to actually kind of highlight some controller-based VR games, because the Oculus Rift did not have. I mean, it had this little remote thingy, and then it shipped with an Xbox controller, which I actually do still use. So thank you, Oculus, for that. But there were a couple of games that were made for a controller and not Roomscale that came out in March of 2016, and some of them I had played earlier. Some of them I did not. But I think your chat was, he thought it was going to be just about racing. Like racing online games, and I was a really good Wipeout style or F-Zero style racing. that was a launch title for the Oculus Rift, and it actually come out in the DK2 days. That's when I first played it. But that was one of my favorites racing games. Sit back and just you use the controller, but I mean it had the speed of Wipeout, and it was a lot of fun. So that was one of the ones that I liked, and an honorable mention on there. To talk about Rift, just to bring in some Rift stuff. Eve Valkyrie came out. That was a launch title. It came free with the Oculus Rift CV1, and it was a flying simulator. It was a little more complicated for me than I wanted because I never really got into like the Elite Dangerous stuff because Elite Dangerous came out on launch or Star Citizen. But Eve Valkyrie was definitely a title that came out for the Rift. But I spent more time in Radial G.
But speaking to both of those games, Radial G and Eve Valkyrie, what about motion sickness? Because like in the early days of VR, so you had VR headsets even before these things started to arrive. What was your experience in regards to motion sickness? Was it much of a problem for you, or are you one of these like iron sea leg guys?
It was not as much of a problem for me by the time the CV1 came out. It was really the low frame rates of the original.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like I've got the DK1 and the DK2, but once we got to the CV1, it was fine. And a lot of times, just to kind of put to kind of explain how it didn't affect me in those cockpit games is because you're in a cockpit. So your eyes are focused on something. The world around you is moving, but inside you are seeing a steady cockpit. And, the tracking of your head helped you not to get motion sick. So I didn't get that much motion sick from the flying and the racing games because there was always something to focus on, and they would put some kind of reticle on the screen in front of you that moved with your head. So it was something there, and it just looked like you were looking out windows, looking out of a plane.
Yeah.
But if you get motion sickness in a car, then, you're probably going to get motion sickness trying to play a car game in VR.
Yeah. I mean, motion sickness is a thing, and Gary, I don't if you want to talk about Windlands, because Windlands is a game. Let me go ahead and grab the Windlands trailer. Windlands is a game that I had heard about. Like people, everybody had been talking about this game during the launch phase of the Vive and everything, and it was an exciting game. The whole Spider-Man thing, I liked the graphics, the kind of retro-y graphics of it. I thought super colorful and everything, but I actually avoided this game like the plague because there is a strong contingent of people that said this is a straight up barf simulator, and people were saying that they were literally were throwing up. This was making them sick for hours and stuff like that. So I thought, oh, no, I'm not going to touch this at all. And you know what happened is MameFan, our very own MameFan from the VR365 community, he actually bought me Windlands and was like, just try it and see if it bothers you. Just try it for the hell of it. And I tried it, and it was like love at first sight. But Gary, I know this is one that you wanted to talk about briefly, so go ahead.
Yeah, it's a really good game. This day it's still a really good game. I went into this last week as well, and this led on to me playing Windlands 2, which I think is an even better game, honestly. But the original Windlands, it just feels good to play. It's one of those games that just feels good, and no matter how many times you do certain swings and things like that, it still feels good to play this game, and that's part of the appeal to it for me. But yeah, with the motion sickness part of this, I think. Yeah, people were saying, it will make you motion sick for a lot of people, but I don't know if it really had that. And it did have a lot of comfort options as well. It had this thing that it sort of made a almost semi-transparent cage around you as well, which was an option you could turn on or off. And by doing that, it sort of helped you to sort of focus on the cage rather than the world moving around you as you were doing that. Similar cockpit thing as well. So it had all of these functions, and it was, I turned all of those off, and it was one of these games where I knew my son really liked it, but putting him in, I was saying, look, if it starts to make you feel odd, you need to tell me immediately, and we'll get you straight out there. But he's never had a problem with it. He played Windlands a lot. He was in it again last week. He still loves it. I still love it. I think to this day, it's one of the great VR games, Windlands and Windlands 2.
Yeah, Bobby, did you ever play this, or did you hear much about it like when it first hit?
I didn't play it. I mean, I heard about it, but this was not one of the ones that I had picked up. There were some other like demos on the DK2 DK2 era, free demos that had some of the flying mechanics. So I didn't get this one, even though this one's a more polished experience. But no, I didn't get this one myself.
Yeah, just the only thing I'll say about this really quick is like I loved like the music and just the general vibe of the little cartoony world that you're in. And then like you would land on a ledge, and this was in the early days, man, where it still affected me. And like, cause I had enough room scale where I could be like on a relatively small ledge, very high up in this game. And the ledge is right there, and I could like walk to the edge of the and like look down, and it's something about like actually having a few feet to walk and get to the edge and look down that I kind of would trigger those sensations a little bit. Not as strong as a lot of other games though. This I actually was able to play this, and there were things early on I simply could not even play in VR. But Bobby, why don't we'll go back to you, and I got to imagine you screwed around with some stuff from the lab, from Valve. Is there any particular experience in the lab that you really got into?
The one where you're shooting the portal cores at everything. That was just the one I liked the most. And then also like throwing things and have the dog go get them. But it was the portal core, the Angry Birds game, basically. Angry Birds. That one was the one that I actually played the most in the lab. And I got to say, like, the one time I wanted most the Vive was in this trailer you're showing. And it was right before he was going into the lab. And he's like, they throw him the wand and he catches it upside down. And that's when the green screen turns off. I was like, okay, I want that. Like, that was the 1 second in this trailer that got my attention. But yeah, so in the lab, the one I played the most was the Angry Birds VR.
Yeah, that's Slingshot, and that one is interesting because I never really played it at the time, and then I played it like years later and was like, this is so damn good. And you know what the best part of that one was? The best part of that one was the comedy of the little guys, you know, the guys that you're like the funny, hilarious things that they would say.
Yeah, Portal was always great with their comedy writing, especially on the cores, on all the different variations of the cores.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned right there is you were also talking about postcards, which is this one where this was one of the very first things I experienced in VR, because like when I first got VR, I did the Steam VR setup. That was the very first thing I experienced, and holy shit, it blew me away. Just everything going zzz, 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 and like all the, you know, the balloons, everything just blew my mind.
Yeah, you hold down up to get the blue balloon and down to get the
totally blew my mind. And then the next thing that I tried was the postcards, where you go into the postcards and there's like Vesper Peak. There's like 3 different places that you can go to. And let's see here. I have a different trailer that kind of shows more of it. But yeah, this was super cool because this is basically our first example of photogrammetry, and this is like a brand new thing. You know, you're in the lab, you grab the little ball, you put it into your head, and then bam, you're in this like photoreal mountaintop. I think somewhere in Washington. You've got your little robot dog there. Bobby, did you want to talk about this experience?
I was to go in and it humanized kind of like the VR experience, and it was something that felt like it gave a glimpse of the future of what it could be and what we could do, and that thing was just so
well
cute.
The first
I'm watching your Twitch feed like on a 5-second delay, and they're like, oh, you're so cute.
The first thing I thought of when I got in here is I thought, oh my God, this is going to get all the grandmas. The grandmas are going to love this shit. Once this is like super photo real and somebody could visit any freaking location. I mean, that is going to be so mind blowing to think of that reality that is so inevitable. Just think of the fact that with like Google Earth and everything, you're going to be able to go to virtually any location on planet Earth and see like a high resolution photoreal almost view of it and be able to like stand there and look at it. Like that just changes our reality altogether, doesn't it?
I already do that with the Google Earth on VR. I already do that.
Have you been back into this thing, you guys, the postcards thing? Because it looks even better with these high resolution headsets like the Index and the Rift S. It looks fantastic. I was surprised by how good it looked because I don't remember it looking as good as it does when I went back in there. But yeah, it's impressive.
I would like to try it in like a HP Reverb or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
We got more high resolution.
I have back into this, but I have like done like the Steam VR home areas that are photorealistic.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah, so since we're on the subject of the lab anyway, why don't we talk about what I think maybe is the single most impressive part of the lab, if I can find it here. And that, of course, is robot repair. Like, dude, this was like our first true glimpse. Like, this was the first glimpse at AAA VR gaming, what it might look from Valve. And I fully thought that this was a snippet from a full-length game that they were making. Like, I thought this was just like we're going to play a full-length game that is going to have this little snippet in it as like one little 5-minute segment of a much longer Portal experience in VR. And it didn't actually end up happening. One question I have, though, about this, was this almost more impressive than what we got in Half-Life Alyx? Is that blasphemy to say that? Bobby, I'll go to you first.
Well, yes, because I didn't get scared during the robot building. But no, I mean, they're learning. Valve was learning, and so this is what they were learning in 2016, 2015 when they were working on this. And I on Alyx, nothing compares to Alyx right now. So no, I mean, Alyx is intended to be a shooty horror game, and this is not. And so they're two different things. It's really not fair to compare the two.
At the very, very end, though, speaking of like getting freaked out in VR and stuff, how did you handle like the very end of this?
I knew it was coming.
You saw a video already or something? Prepared yourself?
Yeah, if I'm prepared for it, I'm fine.
Oh, you know one?
But it's like...
I know a trick for any horror game, Bobby, from here on out. Here's how you defeat all horror games. What you have to do is whatever the bad guy or whatever it is, just let it kill you. Just stand there. Just like, it could be a giant Black Widow that looks scary. Like, for me, Black Widows...
It's not about... Yeah, my doctor would be like,
Don't
no.
do that, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I actually have a heart thing like this, like, so I was actually, let's switch it up. We're going to switch it over here, and I'm going to bring up another subject just because we're on this topic about like being scared and like being concerned and stuff. Because before I got VR, so I'm going to reveal something here. So I have this like irregular heartbeat condition that I have where every once in a while my heart goes into like a little bit of a weird rhythm, or it has like extra beats and stuff. And then every once in a real blue moon, I actually go into full-fledged atrial fibrillation for like 8 hours or whatever, and then I come out of it and I'm fine. But I'm not in it right now, and it's like once a year maybe that happens. It's like just some weird thing where it'll happen. So I have these different little heart things that I have to deal with, right? And then like high cholesterol and high blood pressure and all this. I mean, not like ridiculously high, but higher than they want it to be. And so when I ordered a VR headset, I'm not gonna lie, man, I was a little bit scared to death by all of this stuff because I didn't know how real is it going to be. Like, I never tried VR. I never tried a Daydream. I never tried a Gear VR. I never tried anything, a DK1, DK2, nothing. I had no idea about anything. So it was all brand new to me. And when I first put that VR headset on and I was in the Steam VR setup and it was like zzz, 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 and all these things moving around and the sounds and everything, I was like, oh shit, this is so immersive. This is so incredible. It's like freaking me out. Like it's like tricking my lizard brain. And so horror experiences scared the daylight out of me. And so this was one of the very first ones that we had. Brookhaven Experiment, wavy ass wave shooter. The whole wave shooter thing kind of started with this. And this is the one that all the YouTubers played because, you know, it's like zombies, it's horror, it's 360 degrees. So it got a lot of little pub and stuff right around the time when this happened. So I had a demo for this game. I didn't even own the game. I had the demo. And I'm not even kidding. This is going to sound so dumb. But I'll switch over to my large window here. So I had the demo to this, and what would happen is I'd be like, okay, you know what? I would psych myself up. I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to fire up Brookhaven. I don't care. I'm going to deal with it. And I would put the headset on, and I would be in Brookhaven, and I'd be in it for like 35 seconds, and I'd hear noises and stuff, and I'd be like turning, and I couldn't deal with it. I'd take the headset off. And this would go on for like weeks where I was basically trying to fight my fear. I had a buddy come over. A buddy came over to my house, put him in the whale demo, put him in various demos, and he was like, do you have anything more intense? And I was like, well, I got a zombie game. I got this Brookhaven Experiment demo. You want to try that? He's like, yeah, I want to try that. I put him in that, and he's like, yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, like he wasn't even getting freaked out at all. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, oh my God, I'm scared to death to play this thing. He's not getting freaked out at all. And so then after he left, I was like, okay, I got to do this. I got to deal with it. And so eventually I finally was able to play this game. But I seriously had a fear in the beginning, and I still have a fear. Like, there are some creepy crawlies in this game. You get into certain parts of Brookhaven Experiment, and it's your worst nightmare realized. Giant, like, lizard, bug-like things that are creeping and crawling and making all those creepy noises. Bobby, it seems like you might want to say something about this. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so well, with me, it's not necessarily the horror. It's more like the jump scares, because like we're mentioning stuff. What I have, it's called vasovagal syncope, and it's essentially when something triggers it, my blood pressure drops to zero, or starts dropping to zero, and I pass out in the next 5 minutes. And it can be something physical, but it can be also something mental. This triggers when I get a shot. This triggers when I get blood drawn. This triggers one time when I fell on my side and my keys punctured the side of my leg. But it also triggered one time when somebody came behind me and yelled boo. And basically what I have to do is I have to go lay down, put my knees up, and then I don't. It actually, and it comes in at the worst time. Like the last time it happened is when I got my eyes dilated at the eye doctor. I almost passed out in the waiting room while my eyes were getting dilated. So it's really the startlement, is being startled. That's what I try not to put myself in a position. So yeah, the bad guy could kill me after he startles me, but I'm also going to have to take the headset off and deal with it, and try not to pass out, get my blood pressure back up. So that's why I don't do this stuff. It's not because I'm scared of the bad guy or hate gore or anything, because that's not it at all. It's I don't want to be jump scares that I'm not prepared for. If I'm prepared for the jump scare, I'll be fine. But it's something that comes out at me is one of my triggers. And a lot of people have this condition. If you remember, one of our presidents on a pretzel and then passed out, and we all made fun of him. It's the same condition. He had vasovagal response.
Wow, that sucks. That really does suck. And yeah, you would have to adjust things to deal with that. Gary, what about Brookhaven? Did you ever try because there was a demo for this that was pretty famous at the time, and then some people would just buy the full game. I ended up getting the game, I believe, on a Steam sale at some point.
Yeah, I played the demo. I think pretty much everybody played the demo that early days anyway, at least for a few minutes. And it was good. I remember my sister coming over, and I put my sister into the demo of Brookhaven as well. And she, after about 30 seconds, because it's got those things where they come up from one angle, but then they'll also suddenly appear behind you as well. And you hear the noise and you turn around and they're right there. And as soon as that happened, she threw the headset off. She actually took it off and just threw it. And she went and curled up and was traumatized in a corner. So I rushed over to the headset, of course, and made sure it was all okay. But yeah, it did have that reaction. And my wife has actually done the same thing in certain games, certain titles, certain horror games, where she just couldn't handle it and immediately just took the headset off, and she had that instantaneous response. And I mean, I suppose for your condition, Bobby, a chair in a room was one that, it's a horror game. It just stuck out to me immediately.
Yeah.
But that is filled with those kinds of moments that you were speaking of there,
Yeah.
where it's suspense, and then all of a sudden there's a sense of relief when something happens, but there's jump scares all the time.
Yeah, no, and so I never did that. And I also want to point out that some indie developers in the early days in the DK1 days were jerks. There was one specifically. I can't remember the actual name of it, but it was basically you could watch it was the first VR titles, and it was a free thing, as they all were in that time, in a theater. So you were in a big movie theater, you could pick a file on your computer, and you could play it. I can't remember exactly what this one was called, but one of the very first, be sitting there watching, and if you look at one of those, like one of the ghosts from the rain, like just staring at you, like in the seat right next to you, and I was like, oh. No. He got a couple. He removed it. He wound up removing it, but yeah. So I was like, okay, some indie developers are jerks, and they're gonna do this. There was another one where it was like, it's not the blue. It was one of the, you could go underwater and look at sea life, and if you went down far enough, a shark would come eat you, and it was a jump scare. And I was like, oh, you jerks.
PlayStation VR had that, where there's like a great white at a certain point.
Yeah.
So, what I just threw on the screen right now is Lucky's Tale. And so here's what I don't remember. So, Gary, I know you were in the same boat that I was. We both bought HTC Vives. We did not have an Oculus. You didn't have an Oculus Rift, right? Right away, Gary? Yeah.
Not straight away. I did pre-order one, but then when my Vive pre-order came through earlier, I cancelled the Rift.
Yeah, and I was the same way, and it wasn't because I was anti-Oculus in any way. It was just like, I was like, well, this one has the motion controllers now, and it has the Lighthouse, and it has Steam, and all this stuff. And I just thought, well, I'll eventually get the other one because we knew that it was going to have better controllers at a certain point, so I just decided to wait, right? But the Rift was out there. Lucky's Tale was out there. And I've always been like a Mario guy, a Sonic guy. I love these games. I've always loved these games. Jak and Daxter, all the way through, right? And so this was out there. Now I know Revive was a thing. And I used Revive with my HTC Vive playing Lucky's Tale with an Xbox controller that I had. And I know you did it too, Gary. The question is, when did we do it? I don't remember exactly when, but I know it was pretty early in 2016. It must have been. Bobby, you don't happen to remember how quick Revive was around, or did you? You didn't need it though.
I never used it because I had the Vive and I played Lucky's Tale on, so I didn't need to use the Vive. No, but I really enjoyed this game, so I'll let, I don't know who's talking first.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed this because there were some demos in the DK1, DK2 days of how to do a side scroller in VR, but I really liked the way that Lucky's Tale did it, where it still used the full 6 degrees motion tracking of your face, which is not something we easily had. But I really enjoyed it, and like I also enjoyed Astrobot. When that came way later on PlayStation VR, which was kind of the same concept. But no, I really thought that they did a really good job with the design of the game to make use of being able to move your head around. It was a lot of fun. It is kind of sad that it didn't stick around as a VR title because its sequel is now a pancake game that you can play on your consoles. I thought that this was a lot of fun, and I hoped we would see more games like this.
Yeah, man, I freaking love this game when I first tried it, because it was like you were in a Mario world, because a lot of the VR games were going for realistic, a lot of brown, dark tones, and this was like hyper colorful, bright Mario world, happy music. Oh, one question I do have with this game is, because I put my kids in this game, I put other people in it, and a lot of people had a problem with like the floating camera and maybe feeling a little bit oozy. For me, it was flawless. I never had it. It floated perfectly. I never had any problems.
I like the fact that I was the camera. That's the key here. You are the player. In this one, you are the camera. And so if the camera sucks, it's your fault. It's not the fault of the person. And other games like Moss have done this as well, where you're the camera. But that's what I liked about this, and it was just a different way of thinking about VR. But most people were thinking about the first-person experience. But this was the first thing to show how to do an actual good third-person experience in VR.
Yeah, Gary, what about you? I know you were playing this early on. Did you have any concerns? Like one of the major complaints that people had about it was that it was just way too easy. It was like a baby's game.
Yeah, I didn't have too much of an issue with that. I actually liked it for the difficulty level that it was. You can play through it relatively easy. But the thing that first stood out to me about it is when you go in, everything just looks so crisp. Everything looks so clear. And if they were using some super sampling or something back then to make it look that way, that was the first impression I got. Things just look so clear in this game compared to some of the other ones that we played at that time. But it played great. It was a really nice little platformer. There was not really a lot wrong with it, and I think they could have gone a lot further with it and done various other things. If they'd have made a decent VR sequel to it, then that would have been one thing, and it could have been the Astrobot of its time back then, really, because it didn't get anywhere close to the acclaim that like Astrobot got. But I think it did a lot of things that were very good and novel at that time in VR. It didn't do as many things that were instantly enjoyable, and it's not as good a game as Astrobot, but it that time the closest thing that we had.
Bobby, are you surprised at all that this has never made its way to the Oculus Quest? I don't know. It could possibly be licensing related. Like maybe Oculus doesn't own this IP because it went to Xbox. So obviously, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think Oculus published this version. And I think that they went to a different publisher, and I think that developer can make more money making games for Xbox and Switch, and so that's why they did the sequel. And they're probably not interested in porting the VR headset.
Well, this developer, Playful, they were working on a PlayStation VR game called Star Child, and it had been forever delayed. There's a demo disc out there. It's really cool. It's like a Metroid-looking side-scrolling game in VR. And but what happened is this company Playful, the last that I heard, they basically fired almost everybody except for just a small fraction of their original team. And there's questions to whether they're even going to be a viable entity, or they might just be out of business and we may never see Playful again, at least in this capacity. Although PlayStation VR players are still hoping that somehow Star Child still makes its way to PlayStation VR.
Depends on if they sell the rights and sell the code to some other developer at that point. Because but that would make sense. It's also why it's not on Quest. If they don't have enough people to do anything, they're not going to have enough people to port it to Quest.
Exactly. Another game that was early on in the Oculus Rift era was Blaze Rush, and this is one I know when I got Revive up and running, and with a controller playing this, I was blown away by it. Apologies, I got a real low resolution trailer on this one, but you would be playing this game and I would just marvel at it, because for me it was almost like AR. It was like holograms, because I would have this VR headset on my head, but then I'm bending over and I'm looking at this racetrack and I'm looking at these little tiny cars that are going along and the smoke that's coming out the back of them, and when they crash, little pieces go flying. And it's like, wow, look at this little world that's unraveling right in front of me, tabletop style. It seems so awesome. It reminded me of rock and roll racing back in the Super Nintendo days. Super awesome. Bobby, you were a fan of this one as well?
Yes, I liked it. I can't remember if it was a Kickstarter or not, but I remember having it in the beginning. They did release it on Steam, so I think I've got that Steam version as well. I think it was you bought one, you got the other at the time. They were here's how we're going to do cross stores. But yeah, no, Rock and Roll Racing is my favorite Blizzard game of all time. So I keep waiting for them to announce Rock and Roll Racing 2. And they're we're going to do another Diablo. I'm oh, come on, guys, what's wrong with you? But no, and I really enjoyed this game for that. Once again, it's a great way to do a third person game in VR. It doesn't all be first person. You are the camera looking down. I thought that this was great, a lot of fun. I tried it recently with the newer headsets, and I don't think it was working yet. With couldn't get it to run well. Like I think it was too close, and it didn't have the right tracking stuff. So I tried again to see if they fixed.
They
some
have
of that
a
stuff.
Go version of this, right? For Go, I think
Maybe. I don't have a Go.
sure.
But they
So
never brought it to Quest. Gary, what about you? Blaze Rush, were you a fan?
Yeah, I was. I like the idea of it. I just had this issue where my brain just can't seem to cope with a control method. I like games like this, but I like the games where you push a button to accelerate and you turn left and right in that manner. With this one, you control the direction using the stick. You go down, you push down, and then you use the other stick to do attacks. But for some reason, I just couldn't get my head around that. Did Rock and Roll Racing, did that? I thought that was push to accelerate, push a button to accelerate, and then turn left or right with a D-pad, or was it?
Yeah,
I'm just trying to remember. I can't remember now, but
I think you're right, Gary. And I did have problems with it. Like this is like it takes a while. Like you have to play Blaze Rush for like 20 minutes just to like get used to the controls again. And yeah, no, I agree with you. I probably would have done better with a different control scheme.
yeah, I think it was just me not, I think if I stuck with it, I could have got past that easily. And I think what I did play, I thought it was a good game. The combat in it was interesting, this kind of stuff as well. And I can see, because a lot of people love this game, and I can perfectly see why. But yeah, just that initial control method, and I went into options. I spent most of my time trying to change the control method, which you're not able to do. That's what I remember it being like. So, but yeah, it's a good game either way, what I think. It doesn't
One
matter.
of the things one of the things I do like about this game, and what Bobby was talking about, how like you're the camera, third person type thing. What I like is you're the Godzilla. You're basically the King Kong or the Godzilla. Like you're sitting on the ground here, and then the tracks are right there. And so it's like you're like this big Godzilla, and it's like, yeah, the tracks are right there. And there's a lot of games that are doing this. Like Moss did this actually. Like some games are doing this like wraparound style, where they imagine that you're like sitting here and then the game just kind of wraps around you. And so like you're playing Moss and it's kind of wrapping around you. Or there's some other different games that do this as well. And I think it's a clever style of doing it, and it puts it right there, and it's like happening like holograms in front of you. And the argument I've always made is, okay, FIFA, soccer, NBA 2K, Madden, all these games, right? Cost millions of dollars to make these games. To bring them into VR in the way people would really want them first person is going to take a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of play testing, millions upon millions, right? Just to even figure that out. But if they could just bring them out tabletop style, so I can be playing NHL hockey and it's like right here, and like I can raise the like brass tactics, you raise the table up, you bring the table down. I could bring the table up and like little guys are running around, little soccer players. I don't understand. Bobby, let me ask you, why do you think that hasn't happened?
Because they are emulating a television broadcast. They are not emulating the idea of you sitting in the stands watching the game from wherever you are. And you can move around on one Skycam, but all those sports games, they pride themselves on the television broadcast where they cut to different angles. They do close-ups at the right time. They have all the graphics around it, the bottom bar, the tickers, the score bug and everything. That's what they're going for, is a television broadcast, because you're playing the game on your television. That's why they're not doing it. And also, unfortunately, with as much money as it would cost, you brought up the money, unfortunately, there still aren't enough VR players out there to make it worth it. They would lose money on it. And right now, they are businesses. They do care about money. And they've got to think about that. And the money's just not there yet in a VR
Okay,
version.
but one quick question. So Oculus, like the war chest, 250 million, Zuckerberg on stage. I mean, they paid 10 million to Epic Games. They've been throwing money out. Why maybe not take 20 million and say, hey, 2K Sports, we want NBA 2K done proper in VR. Here's 20 million. Can you do something for us?
Because it costs more than 20 million to do it.
Well, not just an overhead view angle, it wouldn't, I don't think.
Yeah. It would.
Okay. But yeah, it's an interesting angle. But yeah, these overhead games are still cool. We still like them. And Blaze Rush was one of the early Oculus games. But if we're going to talk early Oculus games, one more game we got to mention before we go when we're talking Revive and first getting Revive was, of course, Chronos. Yeah, remember this, baby? I don't remember how I got this game. I don't know if, like, Gary, do you think we bought this as like a VR roundtable thing? Because this is expensive.
I think we did.
You know, it was like 50 something dollars or whatever, right? But this was in the early days when we first got Revive going, and we're playing these games on our Vives, like me and Gary. But this game, so gorgeous. The rain coming down, you know how it would switch to like the different, you go in a different room. Basically, the way this game worked is every room you went into, you were like a little ghost that was put in a very specific spot, and that was your angle. And so you're like a little ghost sitting over here, and you're controlling this action adventure character. Beautiful graphics, beautiful sounds. It was a cool, and it was also kind of a throwback to games we're more familiar with. Gary, I know that you played this one when we first started doing Revive. Any thoughts about this one?
Good game. It is a good game. I didn't finish it. I never got to the end of it. I think it was, people were saying, is it about 8 hours, 8 to 10 hours long, something like that for this game. But it's what I played was really, really good. And I remember people talking about like a Dark Souls comparison with it. I never really, I guess, you know, yeah, I guess I can understand that comparison in some ways, but I don't think it was really overtly going for that. It wasn't like trying to make you fight these bosses again and again necessarily. But it did. You could certainly see a bit of that vibe in there. And it didn't have a problem with motion sickness because the camera didn't move or anything like that. You were stuck in place, fixed. You know, you go from one room to the other and you were a camera just stuck in the corner and just, you know, around viewing this character and fighting the enemies. It was good. I felt like it got a little bit repetitive, in all honesty, from the amount that I played, but it was still a great looking game, great little concept as well. And I've not seen too much else that really takes a direct lead of what they were doing at that time. So I think, you know, I'd add a little bit more variety in there perhaps, and you could have something as well.
Yeah, Bobby, what about you? Did you sample this one when it first arrived?
No, because everybody told me it was a Souls game, and so that's when I wasn't it anymore. So I saved my $50.
But what about?
Yeah, I didn't. I'm just going to say, I didn't mention that. But the Dark Souls thing, did you get that? Anthony?
I never played the original Dark Souls, so this was like my first exposure to that style, I guess. And I don't know. To me, it was just like a hack and slash game that was like from a third person like fixed perspective, like. I mean, I didn't really like. I guess maybe it is. I don't know. I never played Dark Souls.
Yeah, I guess it. Yeah, I guess it. I'm just looking at the trailer now. I guess it is really. Yeah.
But Bobby, okay, so I know this was $50, and that was pretty pricey, man. You know, when this first came out, considering it's just a platforming type game, like, you know, does it really benefit that much from VR? I still think it's definitely worth playing. But what about all the various sales? Although Oculus was a little slower to have sales than Steam was in the early days.
Yeah. So I actually didn't buy that much on the Oculus store. Just because my thing is I don't like giving my credit card or PayPal information to any gaming service. So it's not just them. So it had to really be a reason for me to do that. And like with Steam, I can go down to the grocery store and buy wallet cards and add them to my Steam account. And, you know, then I've got the money there and I buy Microsoft and Nintendo and Sony points, stuff like that. So I didn't really buy that much from the Oculus store. That's not to say I didn't. I did actually buy a $60 game later in 2016 of the Oculus store and kind of regretting that purchase just a little bit right now.
Oh.
No.
Oh,
I can share right now. I've got props.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is not really the early days of 2016, but it was the days of 2016. But if you got the Oculus Touch controllers, it came with one of these.
Oh,
Guitar
Rock
Hero,
Band,
is it?
So what you did
Rock Band
was you took your band guitar, and there's these little holes on the back, and you would attach this, which it doesn't stick anymore, and then you would stick your touch controller in, and I probably have it backwards and stuff, but you would stick and that's how it would track, right? And I paid $60 for Rock Band VR, which I enjoyed. I totally. The problem is, once we got to the new notes, they're different.
Yeah.
You can no longer play that $60 Rock Band VR. You cannot play it on the CV1 or on the Rift S. You cannot play it anymore.
Wow, that's kind of crazy. They never came out with any kind
Because
of adapter or anything, huh?
Nope. Because the touch controllers are different.
Yeah.
So it was made for the old style touch controller because essentially this looped like that.
Yeah.
And so that's how it tracked your guitar. And you would have it looped like this. And it does not work with this. Some people have made like a 3D printed version of this, but I don't have a 3D print to be able to get that. So that's a $60 Oculus game I won't be able to play again unless I spend some time trying to get a different adapter.
Yeah, well, we've got a system for that. It's called CV1. They've got a system for that.
Then I have to do these stupid things that I hate, the constellations and having to every single time because they around. I love hardware, the Oculus controllers, the headset. I hate the tracking. I love the tracking of the so I had the Oculus hardware and the Vive tracking, and that would have been the perfect VR 2016.
Yeah, well, one of the perfect VR games in 2016 for everybody was the Budget Cuts demo. In fact, not only was Budget Cuts demo like a super cool thing, some argue this game engine is better than the actual Budget Cuts that we got. But no, this was an exciting one. I still remember to this day that quite possibly the best VR experience period in the month of April might have been this demo, like a game that you couldn't even buy. And I remember thinking way back in the days when this was happening, I was like, Neat Corporation, you guys are out of your minds. You could have had this as this could have been like early access. You could have sold it for $19.99. Everybody and their mama would have bought it, even though it's only like 28 minutes or whatever, and you could speed run it in like 4 minutes. But it doesn't matter. In early VR days, we were starved for good quality stuff. And the thing about this Budget Cuts demo is, for me, this was one of the most immersive experiences I ever had in VR, because there was something about the simplicity of everything, the walls, everything just being, it's just like an office. It's like you're in an office and it's got simple walls. But the thing is, the walls did not pop in and out of existence. Everything was solid. It worked well. Then you had these robot guys and the whole stealth factor, the knives sneaking around, the little noises they made. I mean, this is pretty damn incredible. Gary, why don't I go to you first? Robot, what do you call it? What is this we're talking about here? Budget Cuts, yeah. Budget Cuts demo. Pretty incredible. What did you think?
Yeah, it was good. It wasn't. I remember a lot of people were talking about this at the time, and I loved it. I thought it was great, and I played through it a few different times. And the thing that struck me when my nephew came around, he's I think he was probably about 17, 18 years old at that time, and when he tried it. And this is the one title that I put him in that he seemed genuinely impressed by from all of them at that period, which I was, a bit surprised at, to be honest, because I always thought it was a good game, but it didn't blow me away that much more than all the others that were around there. But a lot of the focus of what people were saying about this game was around the teleport method, how you had this gun and it built the teleport within the world, within the narrative of the story and the world and that kind of stuff. So you have this gun, you shoot a little ball and it can bounce off surfaces, and then wherever the ball lands, you get a little snapshot of what the ball sees and what you're going to see when you teleport to that new location. And we'd not seen anything like that, and people were talking about this game around that a lot more. At least my memory of it is that. And it was a good idea, concept, but I don't know if you want to go through when the game actually came out. I still thought the game when it came out was okay, but the performance is good. I mean, this demo, ran flawlessly. I mean, it ran at a solid 90 frames per second on lowest end graphics card they'd recommend with the Vive. So it ran flawlessly. It worked great, and yeah, you could play through it multiple times and enjoy it. So it was one of the highlights, but not sort of that vastly above and beyond some of the other things that we've already discussed, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, Bobby, any I'm sure you remember, if you didn't play this at the time, you probably remember the hype around this one.
Oh, I played it. Yeah, no, it's in my Steam library. The demo is. I never got the full game but I mean, I did enjoy playing this, and it was, like I said, it was a neat glimpse of the future, and that's a lot of what we had back then. Because I mean, especially in the DK1 and DK days, a lot of stuff was the glimpse of what could be, and so it was really neat to have it and be a part of that. And so I don't really have any striking remembrances of this. Yes, I do actually. I did play it and have it and enjoyed it.
You know, my number one, so the reason why I think your friend was so into this one, Gary, and like a lot of people, like it's the same type of thing. I would run people through like 4 or 5 different demos, and this would be one of the demos I would put people in, and a lot of times they would remember that robot game. And the thing about it that I think was the key is, like, when you're in these different rooms and then you encounter the robot, this was one of the first times where it's like, that robot is human size, you know? It's a human sized robot, and it really seems like it is occupying this like physical space, you know? Like if I'm gonna walk over by it, I gotta move out of the way because I can't walk right through them. It's occupying this physical space, it's human sized, and then the noises that it makes, like when they spot you and stuff, it can't help but freak you out a little bit, and you like go into a panic almost. And then you have, you know, like if you have your little scissors or whatever, you throw it at the robot's head, and then it's squirting, you know, it squirts the oil out of it. And then the big body of it like occupies space, and you can pick up the body and move it around, and the physics kind of seem to work well. And I don't know, it was just something about the simplicity of everything. And one of the things that I would compare this to Half-Life Alyx. You might think that's crazy to think that you could compare something like this to Half-Life Alyx. But one of the similar threads between the two is, like, I don't think you see a lot of the seams of the video game seams, you know what I mean? Like a lot of VR games, they might have like super advanced graphics, but like you're seeing like things clipping into things, and it, like, I think there's something about the simplicity of this that like helped it. Something in that way. Okay, so let's see here. I just wanted to grab a few of the biggest games that came out. Oh, you know, here's one. Now, Gary, I know you mentioned this earlier before we did this episode, but there were also various mods, and we're not sure exactly when we tried this, and I'm guessing, Bobby, you probably didn't do this one because you want to talk about a horror game. This pretty much could be a horror. This is Doom 3 BFG. Not an official VR game. You can't go to the Oculus store and buy it. You can buy it on Steam, but not a VR special version. But there is a mod for this, and it was a very popular mod. And during the first year that VR was around, this was like one of the 5 best VR games there was. And it wasn't even meant to be a VR game, but it's just because it was this like full-featured game. And when you're in it, you basically feel like you're there. And so these creatures, you know, I mean, you're walking down the halls. Like this is, this goes back to Brad Shoemaker, Palmer Luckey, and John Carmack, like at that early E3 or whatever it was, one of the very first E3s where Brad Shoemaker interviewed John Carmack, and I think Palmer Luckey was there, and he got to sample Doom 3 BFG in VR and having, you know, looking up in the ceiling is your ceiling and the floor is your floor. And so this was a really cool experience. But Gary, I know you wanted to mention this one a little bit.
Yeah, just quickly, because this was one of the ones, it was a big AAA title, and it wasn't the fact that it was just Doom 3 BFG. And you're right, back at that E3 where John Carmack was demoing this for Giant Bomb and those guys, they did play it, but as far as I know, they played it with a gamepad. And one of the big things with this mod, compared to certain other mods we'd had at that time, was that this incorporated motion controllers in the way you wanted them to be incorporated with a game like this. And that was the big sort of revolution for me, I remember, with this mod. It was impressive then. It's still impressive now. I've been back into this just recently. I set it up from scratch, from the beginning again, just a few days ago. And it's very, very impressive game. It's a AAA first-person shooter in VR, and it works pretty much flawlessly. There's a few things that the ways to work around now with like that, and there are, there's here and there because it wasn't designed for VR mind originally, but for the most part, when you're in the thick, you're playing the game, it works great. And this has to be, without a doubt, you mentioned it, it's without a doubt one of the best titles of 2016. That first year, this mod was blue.
Yeah, when we were thinking about Game of the Year, I think this was in the mix. This is one of the ones that people were considering for Game of the Year. Bobby, one question I have for you on this is like, and this is a question like about Bethesda in general, and I'm sure it comes down to money and it comes down to the size of the audience and everything. I mean, that's probably the answer. But like, I've always kind of wondered why Bethesda, I guess they're waiting for 30 million people. I guess that's the answer. But it's like, why wouldn't Bethesda, like, people are able to buy this, they're able to get the mod, people are playing this, they see it on YouTube. It could take them all of 10 minutes to whip this together officially.
No, it'd take longer than 10 minutes. It'd take way longer than 10 minutes. I'm a software developer. Nothing ever.
But
takes
didn't they
10
do
minutes.
this? Didn't Carmack, like, this was done while Carmack was
Tech
still
demo.
there, right?
It was a tech demo. It wasn't QA'd for consumer consumption. There were probably a lot of bugs in it that when you demo something at a trade show, try to either steer the player into doing something that's the happy path, which is the term we use in software development. So in trade shows, you don't see how much trade show demos are held together by very loose pieces of duct tape. So it's not something a consumer, because like they could release that in 10 minutes and complain about how broken it is because they only develop for the happy path of what trade shows and going to conventions. I've been to many E3s, and if I went off the path that they wanted, the thing broke, and that's not a good look. So it was not ready as something that you could whip up in 10 minutes. I can guarantee you that.
Do you think part of it could also be the whole John Carmack lawsuit? Like this is almost like too tied into like their overall lawsuit, where they, even if they wanted to bring it out, they probably wouldn't, because
didn't they bring out Doom VFR?
Yeah, but that's different than this. That's like a separate
It's different
Doom
than this?
game. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, because they brought out Fallout and Skyrim, and I think the reason they did that is so they could have a yes, we're doing VR stuff. So, but I think that's like I don't know why they didn't do this. Maybe it's because the mod existed. They're like, okay, well, let's do something that doesn't have a mod out there for. I did with Vorpix back in the DK2 days. Skyrim in Vorpix, and I played like Borderlands in Vorpix, and I was like, right, I don't need to be playing games for monitor in VR. So that's why I would have never this route and played the mod, because I realized it just 9 times out of 10 it doesn't work. The 1 time out of 10 it works apparently, and Craft, because I did play too.
Yeah,
Minecraft works great. I don't know because we could have mentioned that. That's not even anywhere on my list, but that was another one that we could have probably mentioned as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was 2016. If it was, I think it was a little bit later in the year.
Well, there was a Minecraft VR mod before 2016. I just don't know how well it translated. And I think it was called like I can't remember what it was called. It wasn't Vive Rift. But there was a different one, because I do absolutely remember playing it in DK on DK2 before 20.
Yeah.
Okay, well, another big game we could talk about real quick, and we're winding down. We'll be done with this show here in just a second, but Call of the Starseed. This was like at the time when we heard about VR and all the launch games for the Vive. This one was kind of celebrated as like, this might be almost a glimpse of what a AAA VR game would look like if you had a developer, or, maybe a little bit less than that, but like kind of giving, at the time it was probably billed as one of the most complete VR games in being this adventure that you could explore. Very immersive, very impressive. I don't know exactly when I played this though, because I think it was expensive for a while and I might have avoided it. Gary, I know you remember playing this at a certain point. Did you feel like it lived up to its billing as this original high production VR game, like the few that was there?
I think at that time, yeah, absolutely, yes. It was a really, really enjoyable title. Again, focused around sort of teleporting, but there was interaction. It had all of these things we'd not seen before because VR was so early. The things that are almost cliche now, where you grab a backpack, you pull the backpack out in front of you, and that's your inventory, and picking these various things up, and they operate in a way that is, it's closer to reality than we'd been used to before with gamepads and stuff, where you've got to operate these, you've got to pick up a cassette and place a cassette in a Walkman and listen to it in that way, and all of these things. So I think at that time it was doing a great job of showing some of the potential of VR. I was just looking on the release date for this. So yeah, this first episode came out on the 5th of April, which was when the Vive was released as well. So this launch title, and I think I did pick this up on launch, but it took me a while to play through the whole lot. I think it's not a long game. I think 2 or 3 hours, something like that. And this put me in a great place for the second episode, which I've still not finished. I don't like the second episode as much.
Dude, Heart of the Everstone?
Yeah, and the thing is, I know I should, and I don't want to be that critical of it, because what I played was really, really good. And I played it for probably about an hour and a half, but it was the loading for me. It was killing that game. Whenever you go from one section to another, and you have to do that quite a lot in Heart of the Emberstone, it was a loading screen every single time. And each area wasn't huge or anything like that. Whereas in Call of the Starseed, because it was a more linear experience where you went from one section to the next section to the next section, you still had loading screens, but that didn't bother me as much as going backwards and forwards as you do in Heart of the Emberstone. It's on me, and I still think it's a great game either way. And one day I will go back to it. But yeah, this one, for the time, just to wrap up, I think for the time, the Gallery episode 1 was absolutely a standout title, surely.
Bobby, did you try this one out at all?
Yeah, I was actually a Kickstarter backer, so I got I was in there a little early. So no, because I grew up when I wasn't playing comp, I grew up on point-and-click adventure games or the Sierra text parser and games. So this was really up my. That's why I actually wound up not finishing episode 1 yet, because there were so many. I have gamer AD. I'm also, with the podcast that I do, I still had to keep up with the normal gaming as well. So I didn't really complete this, and I have episode 2. I just haven't installed it yet. But I really did. I liked this, and I liked the point-and-click adventure style of gameplay, and it's a lot point with something like this and click and move it around. So that's what I really enjoyed out of it, and I like what they've all done, because they've done like the Wizards stuff. The same developers done like the Wizards thing later and stuff. So I think they've got a lot of really great design ideas, and they're kind of pushing forward what we can do in this medium, and that's what I really like about them.
Yeah, one of the things, so being stuck, okay, this part right here where you're grabbing these little fuses, I was stuck on that part, like this part right here where there's these fuses and you're like in a laboratory or something, you got to plug these different fuses. It was a puzzle. I was stuck on that puzzle forever, man, because I refuse to ever go look up any guide anywhere. Like if there's a puzzle, I've just got to bang my head against the wall and eventually get out of it. And so I was stuck in this game forever, because every time I went into it, I was just stuck and I couldn't figure anything out. And so I'd be like, the hell with this. I'm not going to play it. And then finally I came back to it and played it one day, and I finally solved the dumb puzzle. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. It was so obvious all that time. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, it definitely was one of the more cinematic. Like, remember, you're on the beach in this game at one point, there's a radio. Like, now all VR games do that, where you can grab the radio, you move the radio around, and the sound is, you know, like turning on the lighter and looking at stuff. Like, it was doing things that like a lot of VR games hadn't done yet, and they started it out. And yeah, Heart of the Emberstone, though, I gotta tell you guys, the 3D sound, the 3D audio in Heart of the Emberstone, some of the best 3D audio I've ever heard in a VR game. So, like, just for that reason alone, I think you guys should probably fire it up. Bobby, do you have... Oh, go ahead, Gary. Go ahead.
Oh, just very quickly in chat, Nicole said that, yeah, I hope Cloudhead is to it, but I understand that Emberstone sold rather poorly. I just wondering, you thought, Anthony, does the end of Heart of the Emberstone, does that sort of wrap things up, or does it sort of lead on to an episode?
No, it leads on, like it's going to continue, and I believe there will be an episode 3, but I also believe that none of them have sold that incredibly well. I think the first one, they had deals with like HTC and stuff, so it was basically like they got enough money because it was like part of the... It was like didn't it come with the HTC Vive at one point? Like, it was one of the 3
at one
games?
point, yeah, it did.
So I think they get money from that, but then I think Heart of the Emberstone was just like, that was their deal by themselves. And I also feel like the name, like episode 2, Heart of the, like, people don't even know what game you're talking about. Like, I think that name was too damn long and it made it confusing. Bobby, any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, we've got games in the regular gaming world like Kingdom Hearts 2.8 Final Remix, Overwatch, Dumb Seed or something. I don't know. 0.2 Birth by Sleep, 60 Days Over 2. And people still buy that stuff. So I don't know. But I think it's also because we live in a VR world where you know, Beat Saber is now the gold standard. And so they're not going to play a point-and-click adventure game in VR. They'd rather play Pistol Whip, which is why they made Pistol Whip. So maybe, hopefully, Pistol Whip will make them enough money to continue this, because this may be more of a passion project for them. But at the end of the day, a company's got to make money.
Oh, yeah, they're making good money with Pistol Whip, so don't cry for me, Argentina, for Cloudhead Games. But you know what? We've been going for a long time, so I think we need to wrap this up pretty soon. But I just want to get your guys' last feelings about this before we check out of here. And so, Gary, I'll check in with you first. And like, just going back to the irrational exuberance, which was a thing that we did one of the games. But the early days of VR, that excitement, you know, the community. Oh man, how fun was it just being on the Vive subreddit and all these places? Like no, there was an excitement in the early days, and everything seemed bright and cheerful, and there was rainbows everywhere, and we just thought it was going to be so incredible. And then the trough of disillusionment just slapped us so hard. But where are we at, man? 4 years later, like, because going way back to this time, think of the analysts and the business types. Before VR came out, like, some people have projections that billions of people, you know, they thought this shit was going to take off immediately. Some people did. Millions of dollars were lost. Companies have closed. You know, people thought VR was going to take off in a major, major way. Like, this was just going to be like television 2.0. And it was just going to shock the world. Didn't quite happen. I mean, maybe... And
his name was Anthony.
Yeah, I am one of them. I'm definitely one of them. But Gary, let's go to you first. Just thinking back to the 2016 time, where do you think we are now? Like, do you think we've made enough of a jump, or what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think when you look at what Half-Life Alyx is, I think that's sort of a testament to how far we've come. And at the same time, a lot of people would have hoped for that game years ago. When you think that back in 2016, there was a lot of excitement, and I would have hoped that, like, by 2020, maybe, you know, have a lot more enthusiasm, at least from mainstream media. With regard to, and that doesn't appear to be the case, but that's okay, and it's along. And one of the things that I'll say, well, VR as a technology, I don't think will necessarily go anywhere because the technology that it uses is so closely related to other technologies surrounding that we know it's going anywhere. AR technology is not going to go anywhere. It might be a long way away, but it's not going to go anywhere. Eventually, you know, we will be wearing these Apple AR glasses or something very similar from another company. And the technology that is built into those is sort of the foundation lies in other VR headset technology as well. So I think, you know, these two things can roll along together. There's quickly to wrap up on this on 2016 and hover junkers. We've not mentioned hover junkers, and I forgot about hover junkers as well for the longest time. But that was one that got a lot of hype around the early days as well. Play a game, but it's all.
Did you play it?
Days.
Did you play it?
Yeah, I wasn't really too interested in player aspects. I didn't play a lot of it. And I think the multiplayer side, which is a problem that a lot of VR for base just isn't there to support a lot of multiplayer games, unfortunately. So I think it died a bit of a death, unfortunately. But yeah, there's hover junkers, Final Approach, the little planes. That was another one. Cloudlands, mini golf. These are just sort of things that rattle off whenever I think of 2016. Solus project as well. And finally, I'll just, you know, Steve and I was on your last 365 episode that I appeared on. Steve asked me a question, said, is Half-Life Alyx the best game we've got in VR? And it's one of the best games. It's the best game of its type, in my opinion. And the reason I held off saying it's the best game is because it's not Elite Dangerous. Elite Dangerous, to me, is still one of the exemplary examples of VR. And it was back in 2016. It still is. It's still an absolutely fantastic VR game, which is it's a flat game, and it's, you know, one day we'll get there as well. We're more VR games, but yeah, so to mention Elite, but yeah, that's pretty much all I want to say.
Yeah, Bobby, what about you in regards to 4 years later? Like, if you went back and thought of yourself, like how enthusiastic were you back then, or did you always kind of feel like VR was going to be a long burn?
I thought it was going to be a long burn, which is how I got in hot water with your audience like the first time I came on, because they're like, no, nobody's going to be playing pancake games in 3 years. Everybody's, you know, the Quest is going to come out and nobody's going to buy an Xbox and nobody's going to buy a PlayStation. I'm like, no, that's not how it's going to work. And turns out that's how it's working. But we've got to get buy-in from large companies, and we're starting to see that now. We're starting to see AAA caliber games come out, not just Half-Life Alyx, Asgard's Wrath, and stuff like that. But we needed a killer app. We needed a killer app that could only be done in VR. And I actually think the closest we've finally gotten to it, is Beat Saber, because you cannot play Beat Saber as it is designed right now on a TV, because it's using the spatial awareness. There's a line that the beats cross for you to hit. We needed to get that point to get people into VR, to then expose them to some of the other stuff that can be played better in VR. But we needed to find something that is can only be played in VR, and we've pretty much gotten that with Beat Saber, as a gameplay mechanic that you can't do on a monitor. So I kind of knew it was a slow burn, and at the time when I was on here last, I don't think Beat Saber came out. I do want to say that one of the games in this trailer that I played a lot, the one that you're showing here, because we didn't talk about Space Pirate Trainer, and that's not the one I'm going to talk about, but I want to give that a good honorable mention because that's a lot of people's favorite. But Audio Shield was really the first big rhythm game that was in VR, and it was great in the beginning. It read from SoundCloud, it read from YouTube, all that stuff. Now you boot it up, it doesn't have any of that because they got in legal troubles. But that was a really fun rhythm game in the very beginning. I don't know if you remember, you played Audio.
Yeah, it slipped. That one slipped by me, but yeah, everybody raved about that. It just came out on the Quest like a week ago.
So because like it's so different now, because like the game that I had at launch was so feature rich, and unfortunately because of legal agreements, YouTube got on his case, SoundCloud got on his case, like all the other ways to get music were taken away. It only works on music on your computer now on the PC version. So I don't know if the Quest version is different.
Yeah. I don't know exactly how they're doing it on the Quest version, but you know, actually, let's talk about Space Pirate Trainer just for a quick second because I forgot to mention this, and this was one. This was like there were so many free games on the Vive. That was the thing. Like when I first got my Vive, you got games because you bought the Vive, right? It came with a handful of games. And there were so many like free demos and little experiences and everything that I actually didn't need to go buy a legitimate game for a while. I was playing so many little free things that I was not even worried about it. And so one of the very first games that I bought, like I said, okay, I'm actually going to spend money now. I bought this one, Space Pirate Trainer. I think it was $15 or $20 or whatever at the time. And the thing that was incredible about this game when I was first playing it, and I mentioned this at the time, I had a podcast called the Vivecast. And so I would be talking about these games. And one of the things that I mentioned about Space Pirate Trainer is I totally felt when I was playing Space Pirate Trainer in my house, I felt like, you know what? I've got something in my house that is better than certain rides at Disneyland. Like, this is better than certain rides at Disney. I really felt that way. Like, I swear to God, because I'm like, dude, I'm shooting, I'm dodging, these things are coming at me. And then, like, when I would get shot by these things, I remember one time I got shot by one of these things and the blast came at me and it hit me right in the middle of my chest. And it was just like, I just went like, ugh, and I just fell down and fell on the ground. And I mean, nothing shot me. Like, I didn't get hit by anything, but it was just, I was so freaking immersed. It was such early days VR. And I was so blown away by this, man. It felt like Disneyland to me. It was amazing.
Yeah, Space Pirate was. I mean, everybody was speaking about that, and it just got me thinking as well, because you look at Space Pirate Training, and it's like the definition of like an arcade game, a quick, easy access arcade game you can pick up and play. It's based on waves and rounds and this kind of stuff. It works as a perfect arcade game, and if you apply that to get back to where we started this show about retro gaming, that kind of stuff. Back in 2016, there were a lot of that type of VR game in terms of like quick, easy access, jump straight in, arcadey kind of games. And as we've gone on and as VR has matured, I think that we are seeing more of the games that we got as games back in the late 70s, early 80s. It was all games. They wanted to take your money. They wanted quick, easy access, limited amount of instruction, but as games constantly needed, you got more story, you got more narrative, you got deeper, more immersive games, and that's VR is sort of mimicking that indirectly, I'd say, where the early days were focused on arcade. Now we want deeper stuff. We want arcade. We want Half-Life Alyx and that kind of stuff. And you're right, Bobby. You know, Beat Saber. I'm sort of notorious, or I was on VR Roundtable for not really being a big fan of Beat Saber, but I understand that what it does. I mean, it's the most successful VR game for a reason, and that's because it's easy access. It's quick. It's easy, and a lot of people can enjoy it. And it does what it does perfectly.
It's not my favorite rhythm game in VR, but I do recognize what it has done for the industry and how viral it's gotten.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to actually close on this, Anthony, right, before you kind of go in a different direction about what in 2016, because I have a little bit of a different perspective of this, because 2016 sounds like the time both of you got into VR. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I tried. Yeah.
So I was in it since 2012, and I kind of want to pour one out for all of the great experiences and demos you will never be able to experience from the first 4 years, because unfortunately, to make things go forward, Oculus had to basically deprecate and shut off their older SDKs. So there are so many experiences that were my first experience in VR that you will never see and you will never experience. You will never experience the Unreal Coaster, which is what I put everybody in 2012 on the DK1. It was the castle, one of the castle levels that Epic had. It was or in Unreal Engine, it was like one of the defaults. And they put a roller coaster in it. It was like 2 minutes, but you know, you went up in tick, 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 and you could look around and there were birds flying around. It was DK1, it was like a minute and a half, but it blew people away. There are games that were made in Unity Engine 4, that can't be upgraded to Unity Engine 5, so they can't use the new SDKs. One of my favorite games, which was actually a shooter game, so it's got to be really good playing a shooter game, was a game called Time Rifters. They decided basically that they couldn't make it work in Unity 5 because of some of their shaders. So they dropped VR support, and it was one of the big, really good VR games on the DK2. So there's a lot of this type of things that maybe never did get ported up to the new SDK. And so like 2016 came around, and suddenly like half my VR library I couldn't use anymore because Oculus couldn't do the back compatibility. It was the right choice for them. I'm not blaming Oculus for that at all. They had to move forward, and that meant breaking a lot of their old stuff. So for me, I had already been around for 4 years, but like half the stuff I did, I will never be able to play in VR again unless I go find the old SDK and install it on an old machine.
Yeah, but at least somebody would be able to do that, though. Like a historian of VR gaming could possibly recreate it. It'd be a big pain in the ass, but they could do it. Okay, well, the last question I'll ask you guys, and then we're done. I mean, it's already been 2 hours or whatever, but last question is, so we've been early adopters. Like that's the one thing that we have in common. We are early adopters. Regardless of when you came in, we were there in April and May. We were early birds in this VR thing. There's a lot of Johnny-come-latelys out there that just got VR in the last couple of years, and we were the early guys. But my question on that is, some people would make the argument that right now is the best time to be a brand new VR person, because you could have bypassed all that crap and you would have gotten right to Half-Life Alyx, and then you could play some Saints and Sinners, and then you could play some Boneworks and some Asgards and some Stormland and Pistol Whip and Beat Saber and yada yada. You know, you bypass all the bad stuff, right? Bobby, if you could go back in time, would you rather do that? Would you rather just jump to now and not do all the early adopter thing, or do you feel that the early adopter thing is well worth it because you got to saw those Atari 2600 days?
Oh yeah, no, the early adopter thing was really worth it for me, because also I was able to be kind of an evangelist, and I was ready for when people asked questions, and I was able to take my DK1 to people's houses because I had a laptop that could run it. So like for me, since I used it more as an evangelizing tool than actually playing it myself, I probably have watched people play VR more than I've played VR myself. I don't actually play in VR all that often. I play a lot of monitor games still, even to this day. I mean, my Animal Crossing town's waiting for me to get back. But and also I'm a developer. So getting in as early as I did, I actually did develop some VR apps actually for businesses and stuff like that. I've done big, enterprise, not Star Trek, but enterprises in business implementations of VR. And it's because I was an early adopter, I was able to get used to the tools early and stuff like that. And it's why I have a HoloLens. I don't actually think the HoloLens is great for gaming, but I've been using it as a development tool. So that's kind of why I went in, is that I'm more on the creative side of things than just the consumption
Hey,
side
Bobby,
of things.
one quick question, just because in your comment there was something that popped out to me, and it was like, you're saying, like, I put other people in VR more than I'm in VR myself. And one of the questions I have with that is like, so in 2016 though, did you have that hype and that excitement? And maybe like now you're like, I know what VR is right now. I know what it is. It's very good, but I don't need to be in there all the time. My question is though, do you think there will be an advancement in VR where it'll reignite that 2016 passion again?
Well, when the Index came out, that got it for me.
Oh, it did. Okay.
Yeah. So when I got these amazing Knuckles controllers that apparently I'm the only one on the call that loves, this reignited it, and I even went back into old things. I went back into Job Simulator, and they added support for Knuckles controllers, so I could tell JobBot exactly what I thought about him with the Knuckles controllers, because now it tracks each finger independently, and that was great. That was so great. So and when a game comes out that I really enjoy, like an Audica or a Beat Saber even, that's when I kind of go back into it. But no, I mean, I actually still every year I go Dragon Con. Hopefully we'll still have it this year. I don't know. It's in September, but so fingers crossed. But I took the Index setup, and I usually took my Vive setup, and I'd have people at Dragon Con in our hotel suite and play games. And I've done Super Hot in there. I've did the Star Wars Vader Immortal Episode 1. Had somebody go through there, and just watching him, he's a big Star Wars nerd. So like at the very beginning, he's like, "That's a battle cruiser! Oh my gosh!" And he's going nuts because he recognizes all the little Easter eggs that I don't necessarily recognize. So I mean, the excitement's still there. It's just a lot of people can't afford it. And like I said, I'm privileged enough to be able to, and I'm very fortunate in life to be able to afford it. So I let them come over here and try it, and the excitement is still there here in 2019, 2020.
Sweet. Gary, what about you? Going back to the early adopter question, would you keep it exactly the way it is, or would you have been better off playing 3 years of flat games and then just popping up as a Johnny-come-lately right now? Perfect timing.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't change it. I think it was great the way I did it. If I could have got in earlier, I would have got in earlier, like Bobby. If I could have got the DK1 and DK2, I missed out on the Kickstarter, but I was aware of it at that time, but I didn't. Because I've never really been a huge fan of Kickstarter, not for any particular reason. I've just never done it, and that was the reason why. So I was really anticipating the release of the headsets in 2016, and I knew that as soon as consumer versions came out, that's when I was going to jump on. If I could have done it earlier, I would, and I wouldn't change it. Definitely not. I don't think anybody getting into it now is necessarily missing out on a huge amount of content that I would say you've got to go back and play. But I think having that and seeing the growth of VR during that time and the different titles that come out and getting excited by all these little incremental better games that just come out month on month on month. You see how the slow progress is being made by developers, and that was an interesting thing to do as well. So I wouldn't change it, but getting into VR now is a great time as well. Of course, you've got Half-Life Alyx, you've got all these great games to play. So
Yeah, and my answer to the question is I've always done this. I've always been this crazy early adopter nut. People would be playing Super Nintendo and Genesis. I'm the one weirdo that has a Jaguar and a Panasonic 3DO. This goes forever off into the future. First dude with a DVD player, Blu-ray, all of it, just a weirdo, man. Always jumping on these things. But yeah, no, I wouldn't change anything because you know what? Going back, like when I think of my entire video game history, going all the way back to Atari and Genesis and Super Nintendo and PlayStation and all that stuff, my favorite memories were the launches of the things, the super early days, because the possibilities were endless. You were just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And it was like bleeding edge, man. You were right there in the bleeding edge. You were seeing the future. Like when I was playing my Panasonic 3DO in 1994, I was seeing what everybody else was going to see in 1997 and 1998. I was getting a preview. And I feel like with VR, I think eventually everybody is going to come to VR because it's just going to be, the graphics are going to be too good. It's going to get too comfortable. Everything's going to get great. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, now see, I'm also like with Fluke because in your chat here, because the early DK1 days were fantastic. There was a new experiment every single day on the DK1, and so it's kind of the same thing that you were going through in 2016. A lot of us were going through in 2013. Just like there was always something new. I'm like, oh, this free demo of like a space cockpit simulator, and I was like, oh man, I can actually I look up and I can watch the enemy go through instead of having to use the right stick to look around. And so a lot of that was a lot of fun. I'm really glad that I was able to experience, especially like 2013 and 2014, which just led up to the 2016 that you remember. So I was very excited to be part of the ground floor of that, to get up, or the basement, I guess, the foundation, to get up to the ground floor when you came on.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing, and we are the early birds. 100 years from now, they'll be digging up this podcast. No. But yeah, thanks so much, Bobby. Absolutely appreciate you taking the time coming on the episode. Awesome to have you here as a early adopter of this technology and all your experience with it even before it officially came. Thanks so much for spending all this time. And Gary, thanks so much as well. Also, super long podcast. Absolutely appreciate it. I know it's late there in the UK. You probably got to get up early tomorrow. So apologies for that, but definitely loved having you guys.
Yeah, it's great being on the show again. Thanks, Anthony.
Alrighty, well, that's going to go ahead and do it for this episode. I will be back on Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific time, back on YouTube with a regular normal live stream talking about normal daily news and stuff in the VR gaming industry. And, be sure to check out the Bobby Blackwolf show. Definitely check that out. I'll have to add the link to the show notes later. And check out Reckoner VR's channel as well on YouTube. Some No Man's Sky stuff, and maybe Reckoner VR will get on there and do something else as well. Nice, interesting video or something.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I'm live. I'm live tonight on Twitch. So my show is here on Twitch at the VOG Network Twitch channel, Voice of Geeks Network. So it's VOG Network, and I am live for 1 hour, starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Tonight, there's probably not going to be any VR talk. We're going to be talking about some stuff about the Nintendo Switch and Animal Crossing, because it's still a general gaming podcast. But I did talk a little bit about Half-Life Alyx a couple weeks ago. And it's available. It's called The Bobby Blackwell Show, which is a terrible, terrible name for a podcast. But I've been doing it 15 years. I can't change now, unfortunately. But I'm on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn. Probably iHeartRadio has it too, even though I never added it to them. So I'm everywhere.
Bobby Blackwolf, the original podcaster. No one ever did it before.
No, there were people before me. There were people
but
before
you're
me,
pretty damn early, man. You were there. Talk about early days. Talk about glory days. Those were the glory days. Remember, God, what was Major Nelson? I'm trying to remember the old podcast I listened to in 2005. But you were one of them, dude. 2005.
Yeah, no, it was me. The ones that are still around are Gamertag Radio is still around from that time. Orange Lounge Radio actually started in 2002. We're pretty sure they're the longest running video game podcast, and they're actually on after me on the same channel. So OLR is on right after me on VOG Network. There were a couple others around that time. I think there were 50 video game podcasts when I started, and now there's 50,000.
But Bobby, the beautiful thing is now everybody's making money now, according to Joe Rogan and stuff. I'm watching these Joe Rogan episodes, and he has some guest on, and he's like, "Yeah, there's money in podcasts," and I'm like, "There is? This is the first I ever heard of it."
Yeah, maybe for 5% of the people, and there's so many podcasts that's still a lot of people. But it's really about 5%. We get Twitch subs in bits. That's literally the only money we get. So it's all donations.
Yeah, it's cool though. We do it for the passion, for the love.
Yep.
All righty. Well, that's gonna wrap it up. Thanks again, Bobby. Thanks, Gary, and we'll see everybody next time. Bye.
Bye.